So we'll begin with the session for today. Yesterday we had started with module 1 and today we are just continuing the module. So in our first module is basic concepts of income tax. Okay, where in our yesterday's class we already seen basic concepts and definitions in lecture 1 and what is capital and revenue receipts and expenditures in yesterday's lecture. That was our lecture 1. Today we will be seeing what is the basis of charge and scope of total income and what is the meaning of residential status and incidence of tax. So today's lecture will be covering these two aspects. So moving ahead, basis of charge and scope of total income. Now what do you mean by basis of charge? It is nothing but it is a procedure, okay, for computation of total income of an individual for the purpose of levy of income tax. Basis of charge means on what basis are you going to charge income tax on the income of a particular person. Now, you all know that income tax is charged on the income of a particular individual, but how to determine the total income of an individual? So what are the steps which will help us to determine the total income of an individual? Tomorrow, if any SSC comes to me and tells me that what is the payment of tax I have to make to the government, so directly I will not tell him, okay, what is your income, you tell me, and I will just put the rates applicable and you pay me so much amount of tax. So there is a steps that needs to be followed in order to derive at the total income of an individual, based on which we will be charging the tax on his total income. So let us see what are the steps. So totally there are 8 steps to reach the total income of an individual, because once you get a total income of an individual and if that income is above the exemption limit, about 2,50,000, above the exemption limit, you are going to charge income tax. What are the slab rates and all we will discuss in our next lectures, but today we will be seeing how to calculate the total income of an SSC. And why is that required? It is required because once we know total income, we will also be able to calculate what is the tax that is going to be paid by that individual to the government. So first step is when any client comes near you. Now let us talk practically. Let us understand things practically. When any client comes near you, like what is the tax that I'm supposed to pay to the government? So first thing is you have to ask his residential status. So first thing is when you're going to determine what is the tax to be paid by any SSC, first you have to determine his residential status. Now what do you mean by residential status? We know that as per income tax, the residential status of an individual can either he can be a resident of India or a non-resident of India. And why is it necessary for determining the total income? Why should we know residential status? Because if he is a non-resident, then the income calculation on which tax is to be calculated will be different. And if he is a resident in India, then the income on which we have to calculate tax will be different, because common sense, a non-resident is not going to pay tax in India for the income that he is earning, suppose in USA. So who is a resident, who is a non-resident, this we will be seeing in our succeeding slides. For now, first thing is you need to understand whether that SSC is a resident or a non-resident. So you have to first determine his residential status. Okay. You come to know his residential status. You come to know, suppose he is a resident of India. Second step you need to do is classification of income under different heads. Students, under Income Tax Act, income is divided into 5 heads. Remember, income under Income Tax Act is divided into 5 heads. So government is saying that when you file income tax return and when you make payment of income tax, you have to properly classify that particular income under a particular head. So the five heads of income are income from salary, income from house property, income from profits and gains from business or profession, income from capital gains, and income from other sources. So these are the five heads of income. So it is but obvious that an individual can have income from more than one heads. For example, if I have to calculate the tax that is to be paid by me, so I am working in Jain College, I am receiving salary from Jain College, so that will fall under which head of income? Income from salary. Plus, I have my own individual practice, consultancy practice, chartered accountancy practice. So that whatever income I'm earning from that firm where I'm giving my consultation, that income will fall under the head income from business or profession. Suppose I have kept my investments in bank and I'm receiving interest from that. So that interest becomes income from other sources. So whenever I'm supposed to file my return, I have to classify the income under different heads. You just cannot file the return like suppose total of all these heads income is suppose 10 lakhs. I just can't write 10 lakhs and file my return. I have to properly classify each income, determining that it classifying that under which head it is going to fall. So different heads we are going to study individually under separate modules we have, separate units we have for that. So we will be studying. As of now, for this unit, just remember there are five heads of income. Income from head salary means under this all that income that an employee is receiving from employer, that income will fall under the head salary. Income from house properties, all the income that you're receiving against a house property, either it can be rented property, self-occupied property. Third is income from business or profession. If you're doing any business, carrying out any business, or if you're giving out your talent, that is profession. So in that case, whatever income you're earning, so you're going to put it under the head income from business or profession. Capital gains is any income that you're earning from the sale of a capital asset. So long-term capital asset, whatever, or short-term capital asset, whatever gain you're earning, it is going to fall under income from capital gains. And other sources means if your income is not falling under the above four heads that I have mentioned, then whatever income, miscellaneous income, it will fall under income from other sources. Suppose winnings from lotteries, gambling, whatever you're earning, is it falling under salary? No. House property? No. Profits and gains from business and profession? No. Capital gains? No. So it is going to fall under income from other sources. So first step is determine the residential status. Second, you have to ask that particular SSC what are the different kinds of income you have, and then you have to sit and classify that income under the different five heads of income which I have specified. Third thing is computation of income under each head. See students, under the Income Tax Act, each head of income which I specified, salary, house property, business and profession, capital gains and other sources, each head of income has different calculations, different exemptions, different deductions. Like if I'm earning income from salary, I have got 3 deductions from the income that I'm earning from salary. So each head of income has different computation of the income that has to be charged to tax. So then first I classify the income under each head, and then I compute the income which is going to be taxable under each head. And each head has different set of provisions, different set of exemptions, deductions, which we will be studying in the succeeding modules, where individually we will be studying each head of income. Fourth step is clubbing of income of spouse, minor children, etc. Students, once we know what is the income of an individual under 5 heads, the next thing we have to see if that particular individual has done any clubbing. Yesterday only I told you all that direct tax is progressive in nature. What do you mean progressive in nature? As and when the income income increases, your percentage to pay tax also increases. Income increases, the tax that you have to pay to the government also increases. Therefore, it is progressive in nature. So, what some people will do, like I take my example, it is just an example. Suppose my income is increasing, and as it is increasing, I know I have to pay a tax rate of 30%. Otherwise, I'm liable to pay 20% if my income is a little less. So what I will do to avoid paying 30% tax, I will give transfer some portion of my income to my husband, to my spouse, or to my children. Okay, just in just my intention is to reduce the tax that I'm going to pay. Now if it is my spouse and my spouse is not earning, so he will not be liable to tax, my minor child will not be liable to tax. So here what I am doing is I am dividing my income just to avoid taxes, because I know direct tax is how, as my income will increase, my percentage to pay tax also will increase. So to avoid that, I will transfer my income to my spouse or minor children. But when any SSC comes to you stating that what is the tax I have to pay, you have to ask him, have you transferred any money to your spouse or minor children? If yes, then you have to club that income. Suppose if I have transferred to my spouse from my income 2 lakh rupees, then when I'll be calculating my income tax, I have to take that 2 lakh rupees income under me and not under my spouse, because I've transferred it with an intention to reduce my tax. So I have to club all the income which I have transferred to my spouse, minor child, etc., whoever I have transferred, just to avoid taxes. Okay. Once that I have done, once I got all the income under 5 heads, once to that I have added the income that I've transferred to the spouse, clubbed the income that I've transferred to the spouse, minor child. After that, what I need to do is set off or carry forward and set off of losses. See, many a times what happens is there can be loss under any head of income. Now, I told you all there are 5 heads of income which you all need to remember throughout income tax. That is salaries. Under salaries, there cannot be any loss. So, but under house property, yes, there can be a loss. There can be a loss under business and profession. I'm carrying out a business and I face loss. So I can have not income in a particular year, but a loss in business in a particular year. And I can have loss from the sale of an asset. Suppose I have purchased an asset for a higher value, but I'm selling it at a lesser value. It is a loss to me. So loss. So whatever loss you are going to incur in a particular head, there is some set of provisions, means you can set it off with the profit of another head. So after clubbing all the income, if there is any losses under any head, you then set it off, and either you cannot set it off, then you have to carry forward that loss. So you need not pay tax on the loss. Okay, you carry forward that loss, or else if you have excess income in another head, you set it off. This set of provisions also, we have separate module for this. We will be seeing that time. But for now, you all need to understand at least what is the meaning of this particular step. Next step is, step number 6 is computation of gross total income. Now, what do you mean by gross total income? After computing the income under all the 5 heads, after clubbing the income which you have transferred, and after setting off all the losses, whatever income is remaining is nothing but your gross total income. So gross total income is an addition of income earned under the 5 heads of income, plus adding the income which is being transferred to the spouse or minor children for evasion of taxes, plus setting off all the losses. Whatever income is remaining is your gross total income. Now, what government is saying that you need not pay tax on gross total income. I will give you certain deductions. When I'm talking about deductions, deductions means minus, means reduction. So suppose my gross total income is 20 lakhs. Government says you need not pay tax on 20 lakhs. I will give you certain deductions, and you pay tax on a lesser amount. So, seventh step is you have to apply the deductions from gross total income. Now, these deductions are specified under section 80C to 80U. And what are the deductions available? In detail, there is a separate module for this. So just remember, deductions is given from gross total income if some criteria are met which are specified under section 80C to 80U individually, which we will be seeing in the module, in the succeeding modules. So funds from gross total income, we minus the deductions, then we get is total income, which is nothing but total taxable income. And on this total taxable income, we are supposed to calculate the tax based on the slab rates, like under which slab the income is falling and what is the slab rate for that. Based on that, the rate has to be charged, and we will determine what is the income tax to be payable by a particular individual. So students, I hope you will have understood the basis of charge and scope of total income, like how to derive at the total taxable income to be paid by an total taxable income of an SSC. So these are the steps to determine the total taxable income of an SSC. And why is this required? Why have we to come up to 8 steps? Because based on this total taxable income, we are going to charge the income tax rates that has been set by the government, so that we come to know what is the income tax payable by a particular SSC to the government. So students, have you all understood this slide? In detail, individually, how to calculate, what are the provisions, we will be seeing in the succeeding modules. We have complete separate modules for this. But have you understood the meaning of all the steps? If yes, we can proceed ahead with the succeeding slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Moving ahead. Now, here in my first step, I told you determination of residential status. So the next part that we are going to cover is residential status and incidence of tax. Why have to we determine the residential status? As I already told you, because depending on his status, whether he's a resident, non-resident, we can know what tax he's supposed to pay, because obviously a non-resident is not going to pay tax that is going to earn outside India, and a resident is going to pay tax on the income that is going to earn globally. So the tax incidence is different depending on the residential status. That is why we are learning this. Understand why are we learning each and every aspect under income tax. Then it will become easy for you all. So let us see residential status and incidence of tax. Students, residential status is defined under section 6 of Income Tax Act. Remember that. So residential status is under section 6. We know that an individual, we know that a person is divided into individual, HUF, firm, AOP, local authority, company, etc. Now, if it is an individual or HUF, it can either be a resident or it can be a non-resident. If it is a resident, it is further divided into resident and ordinarily resident, resident but not ordinarily resident. And if it is a firm, AOP, local authority, company, etc., it is divided only into 2 parts, resident or non-resident. So in this entire status, I just want to tell you all that only if it is an individual or HUF, then it is divided into resident and non. Either the individual can be a resident, either it can be a non-resident. And if it is a resident, it is further classified into 2 categories of resident. Either he is a resident and ordinary resident, or he is a resident but not ordinary resident. Now, what is all this? We will be seeing in our succeeding slides. And in case if the status of a person is a firm, if it is a partnership firm, if it is a AOP, local authority company, then the status can be either only two. Either it can be a resident, it can be a non-resident. No further bifurcation is there in respect of firm, AOP, local authority, company, etc. Is this clear? Now, residential status, remember, defined under Section 6 of Income Tax Act. In your exams, you all have to determine the residential status only and only for an individual SSC. So you don't have problems on HUF, how to determine the residential status on HUF, firm, AOP, local authority company. You do not have in your exams in respect of problems. In respect of problems, you have only how to determine the residential status of an individual. Okay. Now, we have seen what is the residential status. Now, let us say incidence of tax. Like, why have we to determine the residential status? In order to know what is the incidence of tax on that particular status. So, let us see that. Incidence of tax or scope of total income. That incidence of tax is determined under Section 5. So Section 6 talks about residential status, which we know is either he is a resident or a non-resident in case of firm, AOP, BOI, company, and it is a resident and non-resident in case of individual and HUF. And individual and HUF, it is further divided into, resident is further divided into resident and ordinary resident and resident but not ordinarily resident. So let us see Section 5, incidence of tax. If he is a resident and ordinary resident, then global income is taxable in India. Means whatever income he is earning globally, it is going to be taxable in India. If his status is resident and ordinarily resident. But suppose if he is a resident but not ordinary resident, then what income is going to be taxable in India? Income which is received, deemed to be received, accrued or arisen, deemed to be accrued or arisen in India. So whatever income is received in India or it is deemed to be received, that is not yet received, he will receive in India, or is going to receive in India, that is going to be taxable in India. Or second thing is any income which he is going to receive from a business or profession which is controlled or set up in India. Any income which is actually he is receiving from outside India, but he is receiving from a business or a profession that is controlled or set up in India. So only these two categories of income will be taxed if the status of an SSC is resident but not ordinarily resident. Next is non-resident. Suppose if you determine that the status of an SSC is non-resident, he is non-resident, then what category of income is going to be taxable in India is income received, deemed to be received, accrued or arisen, deemed to accrue or arise in India. So in case of non-resident, only that income which he is going to receive or he is received or he has going to receive or deemed to be received in India, only that income is going to be taxable in India. Whatever income he is getting from outside India, that is not going to be taxable. So only income what he is going to receive, deemed to receive, accrue, arise in India is going to be taxable. That is the reason why we have to determine the residential status of an individual of an SSC. That is the reason why we determine the residential status of a SSC. So I hope this is clear. What is the residential status and incidence of tax? Remember, residential status Section 6, incidence of tax Section 5. Is this clear? Now let us move ahead and see how to know whether a particular SSC is resident, non-resident, resident but not ordinary resident, resident but not or ordinarily resident. How to understand, how to know whether a particular, suppose an individual comes in front of you, how to understand whether he's a resident, whether he's a non-resident. So there are certain parameters. So now in the succeeding slides, we will be seeing those parameters which will help us to determine the residential status of an individual. Is this clear, students, up to here? Clear? Can I move ahead? Students, are you awake or you're like are fallen asleep?
Ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So can we move ahead? Have you understood up to here?
Ma'am, explain once again that resident and ordinarily resident and resident but not ordinarily resident. Those 2 points.
This in this slide or in the previous slide?
In this slide, ma'am.
Okay. What is this slide telling us is, this slide is telling us that once we determine the residential status, what type of income will be taxable in respect determining the status of that particular SSC. Now, suppose if that we determine that a status, suppose Minas, I determine that your status is resident and ordinarily resident, then what all income will be chargeable to tax in India? Global income is taxable in India, irrespective you're receiving income in India or outside India. Since you are resident and ordinarily resident, you are going to be completely, your entire income, when I say global, that is your entire income will be taxable in India. Now, I am just talking in respect of an individual students, because for your syllabus only individual SSCs are covered. Next, suppose if your status is resident but not ordinarily resident, then what all income I am going to tax to charge in India is income which you are receiving in India, deemed to be receiving in India, arisen or deemed to accrue, that is still not received, you will receive in India, that will be charged to tax, or income which you are receiving from outside India, but from some business which is set up in India. That is, suppose you are receiving any income from outside India, but the controlling authority of that business or profession is in India, then that income also will be taxable in India. And suppose if I determine that your residential status, Minas, is non-resident, then what all income of yours will be taxable in India? Only that income which you are receiving, deemed to be receiving, or you have got that income accrued, your income is accrued in India. Only that income I will charge to tax in India. So that is the reason we have to determine the residential status of an individual in order to know what income is to be taxable in India. Is this clear? Now, how to determine?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how to determine whether you're resident, non-resident, or not ordinary resident is we'll be seeing in the succeeding slides. I will help you all to determine there are certain parameters based on which you can identify whether any individual is a non-resident or resident. And under resident, there are two more, you know, that is resident and ordinarily resident, resident but not ordinarily resident. Is this clear? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So determining the residential status of individual SSC. So section 6 subsection 1. You all know section 6 is about residential status. Now under section 6 subsection 1 is an individual. See, under persons we are not covering everything. We are not covering HUF. We are not covering AOP, BOI, firm, all that. We are just covering an individual. So an individual is said to be a resident in India in any previous year. See, you all know the meaning of previous year. Previous year is a year in which you are earning income. It is a period of 12 months commencing from 1st April and ending on March of the succeeding year. So any individual is said to be a resident in India if he satisfies any one of the following conditions. So remember, there are two conditions now which will be following on the screen. They are called as basic conditions. So first thing you'll need to understand is or determine is whether an individual is a resident or non-resident. Once you are clear with that, then we will see further whether he is an ordinary resident or not ordinary resident. So first thing, we are just going to determine whether he is a resident or a non-resident. So how to do that? An individual is said to be resident if he is going to satisfy any one of the following conditions. I am not telling both. I am telling any one of the following conditions. Let us see what is the conditions. He has been in India during the relevant previous year for a total period of 182 days or more. First condition is saying that when I say previous year, suppose in the exam, if the assessment year is given 1920, so the previous year will be 1819. So whatever assessment year is there, immediately preceding that will be your relevant previous year. You all know what is assessment year in my yesterday's class. We have already discussed. Okay. So first condition is he has been in India during the relevant previous year. Relevant previous year is a year immediately preceding the assessment year. Whatever is the assessment year, immediately before that year is going to be your relevant previous year. So in that relevant previous year, that individual has been in India for a period of 182 days or more. Means at least 182 days or more he's been in India. Or the second condition, he has been in India during the 4 years immediately preceding the previous year for a period of 365 days. First, let us understand up to here. First condition is clear? Yes. Second condition is in the immediately preceding previous year. Immediately preceding previous year. Relevant previous year is what? Whatever assessment year is given, immediately preceding that is relevant previous year. And immediately preceding the relevant previous year, 4 years you have to check. In that 4 years, if he has been in India for a period of 365 days or more, you have to count the number of days he is staying in India. If it is 365 days or more, and when it is and means this first two lines and the last line, both has to be fulfilled if it is and has been in India for at least 60 days in the previous year. So this is previous year. So he's been in India for at least 60 days in the previous year. And what is previous year? You know, a year which is immediately preceding the assessment year. So at least he has to be 60 days in the previous year. And leaving the previous year, before that 4 previous years, his stay has to be 365 days or more. Now, based on these two conditions, suppose if an individual is satisfying the first condition as well as second condition, he is a resident. Suppose if he is satisfying any one condition, he is still a resident. But suppose he does not satisfy both the conditions. If a particular individual is not satisfying both the conditions, here he is staying only for 170 days, or here he is just staying for 200 days, then he is not satisfying both the conditions. Then he is a non-resident. So students, understand that to determine the residential status of an individual SSC, first thing is you need to see section 6 subsection 1, which says that there are two conditions. If either of one condition or both the conditions are fulfilled, then he is a resident. If both the conditions are not fulfilled, then he is a non-resident. So based on this slide, you can determine whether a particular individual is a resident or a non-resident. Now, is this clear? Is this slide clear? More in detail you all will understand when we solve problems on this. But still, if you all have any doubt, you all can raise. Did you all understand this slide?
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, the second point, that is previous 4 years, then that assessee should be in the India for 365 days, no?
Yes. 365 days or more immediately preceding the previous year. Suppose if the previous year is 1819. So 1819, you have to just check whether he is for 60 days or at least 60 days. That is, at least 60 days means 60 days, minimum 60 days he is staying. And 1819, before that 4 years. 1819 means it is going to be 1718, 1617, 1516, 1415. In that 4 years preceding, you all know what is the meaning of preceding and succeeding. Preceding means which is going to fall before, and succeeding is which is going to fall after. So preceding the previous year, 4 years you got to check whether his stay totally in all that 4 years, total stay in 4 years, you have to check whether it is 365 days or more. And in the previous year, that is 1819, whether he's been for India for at least 60 days. So minimum 60 days he's been in the previous year in India. So
Okay,
have you all understood this? See, much clearer you all will understand when we start solving problems. That time practically you all will have the figures, datas. That time you all will understand it much more. But I hope you all have understood this, because based on this particular section provision, you all will be able to solve the problems. So have you all understood, students? Can we move ahead? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, when I say the stay in India, now what am I saying? He should be in India for a period of 182 days or more. So what is the stay in India? He should be in India, right? What is the meaning of stay in India? Stay in India means India. Now, what is India? I've already defined yesterday. India means territorial waters, which is nothing but 12 nautical miles from the sea, Indian coastal line. From there, 12 nautical miles is your territorial waters. Correct? I have defined India yesterday. That is the reason why I have defined India yesterday. So when I say in India, I request all the students to kindly mute your audio. Okay. So when I say stay in India, so it means that even if he's staying in the territorial waters, like suppose if he's staying in a ship, okay, which is in the territorial waters of India, so it will be sufficient to tell that his stay is in India. Have you understood? So India here doesn't mean only the borders of India. India also means, yesterday I told you, the territorial waters, continental shelf, exclusive economic zone, seabed, and the airspace above the territorial waters. So suppose if he is in a ship and in a territorial water which is forming part of India, then that also will be counted as stay in India. The second thing that you'll need to understand is, it is not necessary that continuously for 182 days back to back he should stay in India. He can stay in India for 1 day and then go back. Suppose if he's going to USA, he comes back and stays for 5 days. So you need not count the days continuously. Okay, you can count the days like 5 and 1, 6 days in India. It is not that the stay should be continuous. Remember, students, it can be a break, and then you need to count the days in break depending his stay in India. And the next thing, suppose he is leaving India on a particular day. Suppose he is going to USA on a particular day, or he is coming from USA on a particular day. So for counting the number of days, now this 182 days, both the date of departure as well as the date of arrival, will be considered the stay in India. Remember students, suppose the day he is leaving India for going to USA, he is departing from India. That day also will be counted as stay in India. And suppose the day he is arriving into India, that day also will be counted as stay in India. So why am I telling you all this? Because for calculating the number of days, what all has to be considered. So his arrival or departure from India will be the day that has to be counted as day in India. So I hope you all have understood the points that I have mentioned. What is stay in India? Stay in India also means his stay in the territorial waters of India. Second thing what I have told you all is the stay in India need not be continuous. He can stay in India in break manner also. And third thing what I said is even if he is leaving India, that day will be counted as stay in India, and the day he is coming to India, that day also will be counted as stay in India. And why am I telling all this? Just for the purpose of your calculation of these number of days, which will help you determine his residential status. Have well understood, students?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Now, what did we
Ma'am,
understand? Yeah?
ma'am, Omkar is speaking here.
Yeah. Tell me, Omkar.
Ma'am, nautical miles are calculated for water and air, no?
Yes. See,
No, from
air spaces, all that airspace that is below your seabed. That is
yeah,
whatever nautical miles from India. Suppose 12 nautical miles from India is your
yeah,
territorial waters. So above that,
territory.
whatever is the airspace, that also will form part of India.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. But in your exam,
Okay.
so much technical they will not give. This is just for your information that I have shared, that India is not only India. It also means the definition that I have told you.
Ma'am, if a person arrived at 11:55 from the airport, then he is in nautical miles, no? After 5 minutes, he will leave the nautical miles area. Then
If
what we
he's
have
in
to calculate?
if he's in the nautical miles, that is in the territorial waters of India, it is in India only. And for the purpose
Okay,
of counting the number of days of stay in India, irrespective of the timing is not mentioned in the act. What is mentioned is both the date of departure as well as date of arrival are to be considered in India.
okay, ma'am. Okay, right.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so this slide was just telling us whether an individual is a resident or a non-resident. Now, I hope everyone knows if he is fulfilling both the conditions or only one condition also if he is fulfilling from this, he is a resident. If both the conditions he is not fulfilling, he is a non-resident. Now, next is, and remember this is called as basic conditions. Because after this, suppose if he is a resident, then we have to check whether he's a resident or and ordinarily resident and not ordinarily resident. So how to check that? For that, we have again some additional conditions. Determining whether he's a resident, ordinarily resident and not ordinarily resident. So first we know he's a resident and non-resident based on the previous slide. Now how to understand whether he's ROR or RNOR? An individual is said to be a resident and ordinary resident if he satisfies both the following conditions. Now these conditions, again two more conditions. These two conditions are called as additional conditions. And additional conditions are applicable only once the status is a resident. Obviously, once the status is non-resident, obviously you're not going to check into the additional conditions. So additional conditions, these two conditions which I'll be showing now, will be applicable only if the status is a resident. Okay. First condition is he is a resident in any 2 out of last 10 years preceding the relevant previous year. Means, in short, what does it mean is his stay in India is for at least 2 years out of 10 years preceding the relevant previous year. Now, when I say preceding the relevant previous year means you have to exclude the previous year. Excluding the previous year, you have to see 10 years before that. So 10 years before that, you have to check whether his stay in India is for 2 years or more. Next, his total stay in India in the last 7 years preceding the relevant previous year means leaving the previous year, his total leaving the relevant previous year in the last 7 years, his total stay is 730 days or more. You got to check. If he fulfills both these conditions, then it's said to be resident and ordinarily resident. Suppose he fulfills any one of these conditions or does not fulfill any conditions, then he is said to be resident but not ordinarily resident. So once again, I explain what is the first condition is. His stay in India is for at least 2 years out of the last 10 years preceding the relevant previous year. And why I'm saying and, because only if both the conditions are fulfilled, then only he is going to get the status as resident and ordinarily resident. Second is his total stay in India in the last 7 years preceding the relevant previous year is 730 days or more. Note, only one or none of the conditions are satisfied, then the individual is a resident but not ordinarily resident. This I've already told you. So have you understood these 2 points?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let us see a summary of this residential status. We saw 2 basic conditions. We saw 2 additional conditions. And we saw that residential status of an individual can either be a resident, non-resident, and resident can be ordinary resident or not ordinary resident. Correct? So let us see summary. If he is fulfilling 2 basic conditions, from that if he is fulfilling anyone, he is a resident. These 2 are resident. And if he is not fulfilling any basic condition, he is a non-resident. Once we know he is a resident, then we are going to check the additional conditions in order to know whether he is ROR or RNOR. So if he is fulfilling both the additional conditions, all 2 additional conditions are fulfilled, then he is going to get the tag of resident and ordinary resident. And if he is fulfilling any one condition, additional conditions or no additional conditions, he is going to get the tag of resident but not ordinarily resident. And once you determine the residential status, then we will be able to know what is the tax to be payable by that individual to the government. That is the reason and that is the base why we determine the residential status of an individual. So this was a summary of whatever we've seen in respect of residential status. In detail, more clear, you all will understand when we start solving problems, because that is the time when we are actually going to count the number of days and determine the residential status. But for that, you need to remember the provisions, remember the number of days, remember what is explained under section 6 subsection 1 of Income Tax Act.
Ma'am, please show the last previous slide.
Okay.
Preceding previous one. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Students, first, what I'm going to do is, still we have to cover, Omkar, are you done with it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, today we have completed point number C and D. And in my next class, we will be covering E and F, and then we will be starting with problems on residential status of individual SSC. But for this, you'll need to know the provisions that I've explained in point number D. So we will be starting with the problems not in the next class, but after that. So I hope you all have understood whatever is being taught in today's lecture. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.